the night my house burned down in Maple Glen, Ohio. My mother did not panic. She smiled. By the next morning, I had lost my job and was sleeping in my car. Yet my family still texted me to fix their errors. If you want to know how I became their only savior, and why I watched their lives crack exactly 1 year later without striking a single match, then you need to hear this story. My name is Eloise Hardwick. I am 32 years old, and until 48 hours ago, I lived in a modest duplex on the quiet side of Maple Glen, Ohio. I had chosen that specific unit not for its view or its amenities, but for its distance. It was exactly 20 minutes away from my parents' house, close enough to be useful when they needed a crisis managed, but far enough that I could pretend I had a life of my own. I called it my sanctuary, a place where I could finally breathe without the suffocating weight of my family's expectations. But sanctuaries burn just as easily as prisons. The fire did not start with a roar. It started with a popping sound, like a heavy book dropped flat on a hardwood floor, followed by the high-pitched scream of a smoke detector that tore me from a deep sleep. I did not have time to grab my laptop. I did not have time to find my shoes. I barely had time to snatch my phone from the nightstand before the hallway filled with thick, black smoke that tasted like burning plastic and old insulation. I stumbled out the front door, gasping for air, my feet slapping against the cold, damp concrete of the driveway. I stood there, shivering in my thin pajamas, watching orange flames lick up the side of the structure where my living room used to be. The heat was intense, pushing me back toward the street, singing the fine hairs on my arms. When the fire trucks arrived, their sirens cutting through the suburban silence, I thought that was the peak of the drama. I was wrong. The real show was just pulling up in a pristine white SUV. My family did not arrive like concerned relatives. They arrived like a production crew. My mother, Marianne Hardwick, was the first out of the car. She was dressed in a beige trench coat that looked immaculate under the streetlights. She did not run to me. She did not bring a blanket. Instead, she lifted her phone, the screen glowing against her face, and immediately started recording. She panned the camera from the burning roof down to me, shivering and covered in soot, and then back to herself. "Can you believe this?" she said, not to me, but to her livestream audience. Her voice was pitched to that perfect, concerned but brave tone she used for her Hardwick home brand. "We are just devastated. Please send prayers." My father, Graham, stood by the hood of the car, his arms crossed over his chest. He shook his head, looking at the inferno with a mixture of annoyance and disdain. "You always invite disaster, Eloise," he said, loud enough for me to hear over the roar of the water hoses. "I told you renting this old place was a mistake, always cutting corners." My sister, Tessa, was busy adjusting the angle of her phone, making sure the flashing red lights of the fire truck framed her face correctly. She looked at me, wrinkled her nose, and whispered to her fiancé, who was standing awkwardly by the trunk. "God, look at her hair. It is going to smell like smoke for weeks." And Caleb, my younger brother, was actually laughing. He was leaning against the car door, typing furiously on his phone, probably updating his status. He looked up at me and smirked. "Well, at least you don't have to clean the garage anymore, right?" I stood there, feeling the cold seep into my bones, waiting for one of them to ask if I was hurt, waiting for a hug, waiting for a jacket. Marianne lowered her phone for a brief second, looking directly at me with eyes that held zero warmth. "You know," she said, her voice dropping the performance for just a moment. "Finally, the sky is taking out the trash. Maybe now you will learn to live properly." It hit me harder than the smoke inhalation. I looked at them, my father lecturing the air, my sister checking her lighting, my brother making jokes, and my mother turning the destruction of my life into content for her followers. They were posing in front of the fire truck now. Marianne was directing them. "Tessa, move to the left. We need the flames in the background. Graham, look solemn. Perfect." They were discussing captions. I heard Tessa suggest something about rising from the ashes, while Caleb suggested, lit night. They treated my burning home like a free-set design for their reality show. I did not cry. I refused to give them that footage. I simply unlocked my phone with trembling fingers and opened a rideshare app. My thumb hovered over the screen, my eyes stinging not from the smoke, but from the sheer, dry shock of it all. I ordered a car to take me to the cheapest motel I could find on the outskirts of town. As the stranger's car pulled up, I walked past my family. They did not try to stop me. They barely noticed I was leaving. They were too busy checking the engagement numbers on their first post. I got into the back seat, curled into a ball, and watched through the rear window as they continued to pose while the firemen fought to save the shell of my existence. That was the night I lost my home. But the universe, it seemed to me, was not done kicking me while I was down. The next morning, I woke up in a motel room that smelled of stale cigarettes and lemon cleaner. My throat was raw. I had nothing but the pajamas I was wearing and my phone. And then, the notification chimed. It was an email from Crown Harbor Systems. The subject line was all caps urgent data discrepancy meeting. I dialed into the conference call from my phone. Sitting on the edge of the lumpy mattress, my boss's voice was icy. There had been a massive error in the financial reconciliation for our biggest client, a duplicate transfer that had flagged a fraud alert. "It came from your terminal, Eloise," the operations manager said. "The logs show the command was executed yesterday afternoon." "That is impossible," I croaked, my voice raspy. "I ran the checks myself. I have the backup logs on my private server that show the clean transfer." "Then send them," he demanded. "Right now." I closed my eyes. I can't." "Why not?" "My house burned down last night," I said, the words feeling heavy and absurd in my mouth. "My server, my laptop, my hard drives, they are all gone. Everything is ash." There was silence on the line. I expected sympathy. Instead, I heard the shuffling of papers. "So, you have no proof," the manager said. "And you failed to follow the cloud backup protocol we implemented 2 weeks ago." I had not failed. I had been the one who wrote the protocol. But the migration was scheduled for tomorrow. I tried to explain. But they were not listening. They needed a scapegoat for the client, and a homeless employee with unverifiable excuses was the easiest target. "We have to protect the integrity of the firm." "Eloise," my boss said, "effective immediately. Your contract is terminated for gross negligence and violation of data security policies." The line went dead. In the span of 48 hours, I had gone from a successful financial operations specialist with a home and a future to a woman sitting barefoot in a motel room, unemployed, with $300 in her bank account, and a family who was currently posting a slow-motion video of my burning roof with the caption, "Strength in Adversity." I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank wall. I could have broken. I could have called them and begged for help. I could have screamed. But then I remembered Marianne's smile. I remembered the way Graham crossed his arms. I remembered Tessa checking her angles. They thought I was gone. They thought I was trash being taken out. I opened the Notes app on my phone. I created a new folder. I did not name it Revenge. That would be too emotional. And I was done with emotions. I named it Hardwick Balance. 1 year later, they will call me their savior. They will beg me to fix the cracks in their perfect porcelain lives. And I will stand there, holding the glue, and I will face a choice that will make them crumble into dust. But first, I had to survive the night. To understand why my family watched my house burn with the enthusiasm of a movie premiere audience, you have to understand the entity known as Hardwick Home. It was not just a social media handle, it was a religion. And my mother, Marianne, was its high priestess. If you scrolled through her feed, you would see a life bathed in soft, golden hour lighting. You would see rustic farmhouse tables set with organic linens, mason jars filled with wildflowers, and captions that read like sermons on the sanctity of blood ties. She posted about healing through connection and the warmth of a mother's hearth. She had 50,000 followers who believed she was the matriarch of a modern-day fairy tale. The reality was that the hearth was usually cold, because Marianne did not actually cook. She styled food. She would spend 2 hours arranging a roast chicken for a photo, adjusting the rosemary sprigs with tweezers, and then we would order pizza once the lighting was gone because the chicken was undercooked and cold. My father, Graham, was the supporting actor in this production. He ran a company called Stoneforge Renovations. On the surface, and especially in my mother's posts, he was the rugged, disciplined craftsman, the man who built dreams with his bare hands. He loved to lecture anyone who would listen about the value of hard work and fiscal responsibility. Measure twice, cut once, was his favorite aphorism, usually delivered while pointing a calloused finger at me. But I knew the truth about Stoneforge. I knew it because I was the one who kept it from collapsing under the weight of its own mismanagement. Graham measured once and cut 4 times. His invoices were a disaster of handwritten scribbles on napkin edges. He would underbid projects just to win the ego boost of the contract, then panic when the materials cost more than the client was paying. He preached discipline, yet his business accounts were constantly overdrawn because he treated the company credit card like a personal allowance for new trucks he did not need. Then there was Tessa. My older sister was an event curator. That was the title she invented because party planner sounded too common. Tessa lived her life as if she were permanently walking down a runway. She was allergic to ugliness, and to her, nothing was uglier than a spreadsheet. She believed that budgets were suggestions, flexible concepts that could be bent by sheer force of will or a tantrum. She would sell a client a champagne dream on a beer budget, and then look at me with wide, panicked eyes when the math inevitably failed to work out. And finally, Caleb. My younger brother was 26 years old and had never held a job for longer than 3 months. He was an entrepreneur, which in the Hardwick Dictionary meant he was a serial victim of get-rich-quick schemes. He moved from reselling limited edition sneakers to drop-shipping cheap electronics, and recently, to obscure cryptocurrencies that sounded like jokes. He was always one small investment away from being a millionaire, always just needing a bridge loan to unlock his potential. I was an anomaly. I was the boring one. I worked as a financial operations specialist at Crown Harbor Systems. My entire professional existence was dedicated to extinguishing money fires for corporate clients. I spent my days hunting down discrepancies, reconciling massive ledgers, and telling hard truths to CEOs who did not want to hear them. I was good at it because I had been practicing since I was 16 years old. At Crown Harbor, I was paid a salary. At home, I was simply the operating system that kept the hardware running. They never asked. That was the thing that grated on me the most as I sat in the library the day after the fire, using the public internet to check my severance package. They never asked. They summoned. My phone would buzz with a text from Graham IRS sent another letter. Fix it. Don't let them find me again. No, please. No, hello. Just the assumption that I would log into his portal, decipher the confusing letter, draft the response, and set up the payment plan. 10 minutes later, a notification from Marianne Brand, deal contract attached. They want exclusivity. Is the fee high enough? Read it and tell me what to say. She would not read the contract herself. She found legal language draining. She expected me to parse through 20 pages of stipulations to ensure she was not signing away her image rights for a box of free scented candles. Then Tessa vendor needs the deposit by 5. The card declined. Transfer funds from the savings bucket, and I will pay it back next week. She never paid it back next week. And Caleb need $500 to clear customs on a shipment. A huge return is coming. Don't be a hater. Just front me. I was their human TurboTax, their legal counsel, their banker, and their secretary. I tracked the due dates for the property taxes because Graham would forget. I managed the autopay for the family cell phone plan because Marianne would spend the money on throw pillows if the money sat in the account too long. I audited Caleb's business plans to keep him out of actual prison. I was the invisible infrastructure. They walked all over me, assuming the floor would always be there, never considering who was holding it up. It was around 3 years ago that I started the Hardwick Balance. It began as a way to vent. I had come home from a 12-hour shift at Crown Harbor only to find 3 urgent voicemails from my family, all demanding labor. I felt like I was losing my mind. I felt like I was imagining the burden, that maybe I really was just being difficult and ungrateful like they said. So, I opened a spreadsheet. It was stark, cold, and beautiful. I started logging everything. Not just the money, though. The money was substantial, but the tasks. Date October 4th. Task renegotiated Graham's supplier debt. Time taken 4 hours. Market rate for consultant $200 per hour. Value $800. Date November 12th. Task wrote copy for Marianne's holiday campaign because she had writer's block. Time taken 2 hours. Value $300. Date January 8th. Task loaned Caleb rent money. Amount $1,200. Status unpaid. I tracked every tax return filed, every crisis averted, every contract reviewed. I updated it religiously every Sunday night. It was my secret ritual. I never showed it to them. I never demanded payment. I just needed to see the data. I needed to see the rows and columns proving that I was valuable, even if they treated me like an inconvenience. Looking at the Hardwick balance became the only way I could stomach the Sunday dinners where they mocked my boring job and my cheap lifestyle. They would sit there, eating the food I helped budget for, in the house I helped save from foreclosure twice, and tell me I needed to loosen up. "You are so rigid, Eloise," Marianne would say, adjusting a vase of peonies for a photo. "You treat everything like a transaction. You need to learn that love isn't about keeping score." The irony was acidic enough to burn a hole in my stomach. I was the only one not treating it like a transaction. I was giving everything away for free. Now, sitting in the library with the smell of smoke still faint in my hair. I logged into my personal cloud, thankfully not lost in the fire, and opened the file. I scrolled through years of data. The sum at the bottom was staggering. It was enough to buy a house. It was enough to start a new life. But the currency wasn't just dollars. It was dignity. I looked at the last entry, typed just 2 days before the fire. Task audit, Tessa's wedding budget. Result found $4,000 in hidden fees she missed. My family was not a functioning unit. It was a corporation of incompetence, and I was the unpaid CEO keeping it from bankruptcy. I closed the laptop, a bitter realization settling in my chest. I had spent my entire adult life terrified that if I stepped away, my family would collapse. I thought I was the pillar holding up the roof. I was wrong. I wasn't holding up the roof. I was propping up a stage set. They were actors performing a play about a successful, happy family, and I was the stagehand dressed in black, running around in the dark, moving the props so the audience wouldn't see the walls shaking. Well, the theater had just burned down, and the stagehand had just been fired. It was time to see how the actors performed when the lights went out and there was no one left to whisper their lines from the wings. The transition from being a productive member of society to a ghost is surprisingly expensive. I managed to pay for exactly 5 nights at the Resties Motel before I did the math. Between the deposit for a new apartment, the replacement costs for my basic identification documents, and the looming insurance deductible, the $60 a night for a bed with questionable stains was a luxury I could no longer afford. I needed every single penny to rebuild the administrative proof of my existence. So, on the 6th night, I checked out. I moved my few remaining possessions, a bag of discount clothes from a thrift store, and my salvaged phone into the back seat of my sedan. I learned very quickly that sleeping in a car is not like the movies. It is not a romantic road trip. It is finding a parking lot where the security guards are lazy or the streetlights are broken. It is waking up at 3 a.m. with a cramp in your neck that feels like a knife, shivering because you cannot run the engine to use the heater without wasting gas. It is the condensation on the windows turning the world outside into a blurry gray threat. But the cold was manageable. The silence was manageable. What broke me, or what tried to break me, was the notification that came the following afternoon. I was sitting in the public library, my new office, using their free connection to check my work email one last time before my access was revoked. The official termination letter from Crown Harbor Systems had arrived. It was sterile. It was corporate. It was brutal. They cited violation of data custody protocols. It was a vague, catch-all term, but reading between the lines, I saw the fingerprints of Marcus, a junior associate who had been eyeing my position for months. With my server destroyed and my ability to defend my workflow reduced to zero, Marcus had quietly shifted the blame for the client discrepancy entirely onto my unsecured remote environment. I was not just fired, I was erased. They offered no severance. Citing gross negligence, I sat in that library chair, surrounded by students studying for exams and retirees reading newspapers, and I felt a hollow sensation in my chest where my heart used to be. I had given that company 5 years of flawless audits. I had saved them millions, and because I had the audacity to lose my house in a fire, they discarded me like a corrupted file. Now, my routine was stripped down to raw survival. My mornings began at a 24-hour gym 3 miles away. I still had an active membership on autopay. I would go there at 5 in the morning, not to work out, but to shower. I learned to dress in the locker room stalls, so no one would see that I was putting on the same trousers for the 3rd day in a row. I brushed my teeth at the sink, avoiding eye contact with the women in yoga pants who were discussing their kale smoothies. My diet consisted of anything that did not require a microwave: canned beans, loaves of bread on clearance, peanut butter eaten straight from the jar with a plastic spoon I stole from a gas station. I was living in the margins of the world, invisible, but my family. They were louder than ever. I made the mistake of checking social media while eating my cold dinner in the car one evening. Marianne had posted a photo of herself holding a ceramic mug, looking wistfully out a window. The caption read, "Sometimes. The universe burns away the dead wood to make room for new growth. This is a season of letting go, healing new beginnings." She was calling her homeless daughter Dead Wood. Tessa had posted a quote on a pastel background: "Protect your peace. If someone brings drama, lock the door. Toxic energy is contagious." And Caleb, my brother, who owed me $1,200, simply posted a fire emoji with the caption, "Lit week. Big things are coming." They were using my tragedy as a vague, philosophical aesthetic. They were farming sympathy for a disaster that had not happened to them. Not one of them had texted to ask where I was sleeping. Not one. They assumed I had figured it out, because Eloise always figures it out. Eloise is the machine that does not break. I was about to turn off the phone in disgust when a new message popped up. It was not from my family. Rowan Price. "Hey Eloise, I heard about what went down at Crown Harbor. Marcus is a snake, and everyone in Ops knows it. I know you probably have a plan because you always do, but if you need a couch, mine is open. No questions asked. Rowan." He was a quiet developer from the systems team. We had shared coffee a few times, and he was the only person who ever thanked me when I caught a coding error that would have crashed the payroll system. My thumb hovered over the reply button. The temperature in the car was dropping. My back ached. The idea of a warm living room, a shower without flip-flops, and a human voice was intoxicating. But I could not do it. I could not be in the charity case. I could not let anyone see me like this, reduced to a woman living out of a sedan with laundry in the passenger seat. If I accepted pity, I accepted defeat. I typed back, "I am fine, Rowan, staying with a friend. But thank you." I stared at the lie for a moment, then added, "However, if you know a freelance auditor who needs help, or an insurance lawyer who hates big firms, let me know." Rowan replied 2 minutes later. He did not push on the housing lie. He simply sent 2 contacts. One was a shark of an attorney who specialized in contesting insurance lowballs. The other was a contract gig for a remote bookkeeping audit. Rowan Price. "Good luck. L. Don't let them win." I breathed out, the condensation clouding the phone screen. I opened my laptop. I did not have a home, but I still had my brain. I still had the obsessive, methodical mind that had run my family's life for a decade. I created a new folder on my desktop: Project Recovery. I began to treat my life like a forensic audit. I itemized every single object lost in the fire, down to the brand of toothpaste. I cross-referenced the insurance policy. Fine print. I built a timeline of the night of the fire, logging every minute, and then I opened the Hardwick balance spreadsheet. I added a new tab. I titled it The Fire. I did not put numbers in this tab. I put words. I transcribed Marianne's Deadwood caption. I logged Graham's comment about me, inviting disaster. I recorded the date and time of the termination email from Crown Harbor. I noted every single request for money or labor they had sent me since the fire, while I was sleeping in a parking lot. Item. Marianne requested help with brand contract. Date 3 days post-fire. My status homeless. Her status. Concerned about font choice. Item Tessa requested deposit transfer. Date 5 days post-fire. My status unemployed. Her status. Worried about floral arrangements. I typed until my fingers were numb from the cold. This was not a diary. This was a dossier. They thought I was gone. They thought I was handling my drama somewhere out of sight, quietly absorbing the blame as I always did. They did not realize that by stripping me of everything, they had taken away the only thing that kept me compliant, my fear of losing them. I had already lost them. Now, I was just the auditor, and the audit was just beginning. I closed the laptop, pulled my coat tighter around my shoulders, and watched the rain streak against the windshield. I was not going to strike back yet. I was going to wait. I was going to let the evidence pile up until it was a mountain they could not climb over. I am not taking revenge. I am keeping receipts. The audacity of my family was not loud or violent. It was quiet, persistent, and utterly detached from reality. You would think that after mocking my homelessness and effectively disowning me in front of a digital audience, they would have the decency to leave me alone. You would be wrong. 2 weeks into my life as a resident of the back seat of my sedan, the notifications continued to roll in as if nothing had changed. I sat in the corner of the library, my laptop charging via a frayed cord, and watched the requests pile up in my inbox. The first was from Graham. The subject line was simply, "Tax question urgent." There was no greeting, no, "How are you holding up?" Just a forwarded email from the state tax board regarding a penalty for underpayment on Stoneforge renovations. His message below it read, "They are claiming I missed the quarterly filing. I know I gave you the receipts in that shoebox last month. Fix this before they add interest. I do not have time to sit on the phone with bureaucrats." He was asking the daughter he had watched lose everything to fight a tax penalty he had incurred because he likely used the receipt shoebox as a footrest. Then came the email from Marianne. She had attached a 20-page contract from a company selling organic dietary supplements. Her message was breezy, filled with emojis. "L, darling, give this a quick scan. They want to use my likeness for 12 months. Just make sure they aren't owning my image in perpetuity. Need it back by tonight, XOXO. She wanted free legal counsel from a woman she had called Deadwood. Tessa was next. She sent a link to a shared spreadsheet for her wedding reception. I cannot get the formulas to sum up correctly for the florist. It keeps showing a negative balance. Can you adjust the cells I need to show Brent the finalized budget tomorrow? And finally, Caleb, a direct message on social media, sliding in right under a post where he had captioned a photo of himself with "Grind never stops." His message to me was less inspirational. "Yo, can you spot me, 200? My card got frozen because I tripped the fraud alert buying that crypto. I will pay you back double next week. Seriously." I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keys. The muscle memory of a decade kicked in. My brain automatically started calculating the tax penalty argument. My eyes began scanning the contract clauses. My mouse drifted toward the spreadsheet link. It was a reflex. I had been conditioned to be their problem solver, their safety net, their invisible fixer. But then, I stopped. I looked at my hands. They were dry and cracked from the cheap soap at the gym. I looked at my reflection on the dark computer screen. I looked tired. I looked like someone who had nothing left to give. I did not reply to any of them. Instead, I opened a new browser tab. I had noticed something strange when I logged into the family's shared email account, the one I managed because none of them could remember their passwords. There was a verification email from a hardware supply chain. It was for a new credit account. I frowned. Graham had been complaining about his credit score for months. There was no way he would have been approved for a commercial line of credit with his current debt-to-income ratio. I navigated to the credit bureau website. I had to pay a small fee to unlock my full report. dipping into my dwindling savings. But my gut told me it was necessary. I waited for the wheel to spin, my heart hammering against my ribs in a slow, heavy rhythm. The report loaded. I scrolled down past my student loans, past my old car payments, past the mortgage on the house that was currently a pile of ash, and there it was, Builder's Choice Supply. A credit card opened 3 weeks ago. Credit limit $5,000. Balance $4,800. The primary account holder was Eloise Hardwick. The billing address was my parents' house. I sat back in the hard wooden chair, the air leaving my lungs in a sharp hiss. They had not just abandoned me, they were cannibalizing me. Graham must have used my social security number, which he had, because I did his taxes to open a line of credit for his business. He had maxed it out in less than a month, probably on materials for a job he had underbid, assuming I would just absorb the monthly payments like I did with everything else. Or perhaps he justified it by thinking I did not have a house anymore, so I did not need a credit score. I did not scream. I did not call him to demand an explanation. That would have given him the chance to gaslight me, to tell me it was a mistake, or that he was doing it for the family legacy. Instead, I went to work. I clicked the button to freeze my credit at all 3 major bureaus. I reported the card as fraudulent. I did not name my father as the perpetrator. I simply stated that I had not opened the account. The bank's investigation team would do the rest. They would trace the IP address. They would check the signature. They would find him. Then, I went through the digital keyring of our lives. I changed the password to the tax portal. I changed the password to the shared cloud drive where Marianne kept her brand assets. I revoked the admin access for the wedding budget software. I removed my credit card from the family Uber account, the streaming services, and the grocery delivery app. As I was systematically locking the doors to my own exploitation, my phone buzzed. It was not one of them. It was Brent Hale, Tessa's fiancé. Brent, hey Eloise. I know things are rough right now, and I'm sorry to bother you, but I'm looking at the vendor list for the venue. Tessa said she sent the deposit last week, but the manager just called me saying they are about to release our date. Do you know if there is a lag in the transfer? Tessa said you handle the banking side. I stared at the message. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with a sickening precision. Tessa had not paid the deposit. She had likely spent the money on something else, a dress upgrade, a spa weekend, a necessary aesthetic enhancement, and she was banking on me to notice the deficit in the ledger and quietly fill the hole before Brent found out. That was how it always worked. She created the mess. I quietly cleaned it up so her life could remain pristine. They were not just a family of narcissists, they were a family of parasites, and they had been feeding on me for so long that they did not even realize the host was dying. I realized then that their perfect lives, the successful business, the influencer career, the dream wedding were all illusions. They were a stage play where the props were made of cardboard and held together by my money and my labor. Without me, the wind would blow it all down. I did not reply to Brent with the truth. Not yet. I simply typed, I do not have access to the accounts anymore. You will have to ask Tessa. Then, I returned to my spreadsheet. The Hardwick balance. I created a new tab. I typed the header in bold exit plan. This was not a list of revenge tactics. It was a list of responsibilities I was returning to their rightful owners. Row 1, state and federal tax filings for Stoneforge. Responsibility, Graham Hardwick. Row 2, brand partnership, contract review and compliance. Responsibility, Marianne Hardwick. Row 3, wedding budget reconciliation and vendor payments. Responsibility, Tessa Hardwick. Row 4, personal loan management and credit repair. Responsibility, Caleb Hardwick. I listed everything. The insurance renewals I usually auto-paid, the domain hosting for Marianne's blog, the quarterly estimates for Graham, the reminder notifications for birthdays and anniversaries. I looked at the list. It was miles long. It was a map of my own slavery. I felt a cold resolve settle over me, cooler and sharper than the winter wind outside. I was done being the structural support for a building that would not even let me inside. I saved the file. I closed the laptop. I did not burn anything. I did not set a trap. I did not sabotage a single wire. I simply prepared to turn off the faucet they were used to opening, and tomorrow, they would find out what happens when the water stops flowing. The notification sound on my phone used to trigger a Pavlovian response of anxiety. It meant a problem needed solving, a bill needed paying, or a crisis needed managing. But sitting in the driver's seat of my sedan, parked in the far corner of a 24-hour grocery store lot, I felt nothing but a cool, clinical detachment. I opened the family group chat. It had been silent since Caleb's last request for money. I typed my message slowly, ensuring every word was precise. There was no anger in the text, no exclamation points, and certainly no emojis. Effective immediately. I am ceasing all administrative and financial assistance for the Hardwick family. I have prepared transition documents for each of you. You have 3 weeks to assume full control of your respective accounts before I permanently remove my access. Please check your emails. I hit send. The reaction was almost instantaneous, as if they had been waiting for me to say something just so they could dismiss it. Caleb was the first. LOL. You are so dramatic. Just send the cash. Tessa followed a minute later. Is this a joke? My wedding is in 2 months. You cannot just drop the budget now. That is literally sabotage. Then Marianne. Eloise, honey, stop acting out. We know you are stressed about the house, but do not take it out on us. Come to dinner Sunday. We will talk. And finally, Graham. Family helps family. Eloise, stop being difficult. I have a business to run. I do not have time for your games. They thought it was a tantrum. They thought I was throwing a fit that could be smoothed over with a lukewarm meal and a lecture on loyalty. They did not understand that this was not a negotiation, it was an eviction notice. I did not reply to the group chat. I simply opened my laptop and began the execution phase. I started with Graham. For years, I had managed the Stoneforge renovations portal. I handled the payroll login, the supplier invoices, and the tax filings. Graham did not even know his own username. I drafted a sterile email. Subject Stoneforge. Access transfer. Inside. I listed the URLs for the State Licensing Board, the IRS Payment Gateway, and the supplier portals. I included a PDF guide I had written years ago titled Basic Operations, which he had never opened. Then, I initiated the password reset protocols. A moment later, a text from Graham popped up on my screen. Why did I just get a security alert? Did you hack me? I replied. I triggered a reset. The new password has been sent to your inbox. It is yours now. I don't have time to learn this system, he fired back. You know how to do it. Just handle it until the quarter ends. Read the PDF. Dad, I wrote, then I blocked his number for the next 12 hours. Next was Marianne. Her entire brand, Hardwick Home, relied on a back end of logistics she pretended did not exist. She thought the content just happened. She did not realize I spent 3 hours a week syncing her calendar, answering inquiries, and renewing her domain names. I exported her entire schedule into a generic spreadsheet. I listed every upcoming deadline for her brand deals, highlighting the ones that required legal review, the review I would no longer be doing. Subject Hardwick, home schedule and logins. Mom, here is the list of your commitments for the next 6 months. I have unlinked my email from your calendar. You will need to set your own reminders from now on. Also, the domain renewal is due in 12 days. If you miss it, the website goes down. I hit send. Then, I went into the shared family calendar and deleted the color-coded layer labeled Eloise's Tasks, almost immediately. My phone rang. It was Marianne. I let it go to voicemail. I could imagine her standing in her perfect kitchen, staring at a sudden blank space on her iPhone where her organized life used to be. Then, there was Tessa. This was the one that felt the most dangerous, but also the most necessary. Tessa weaponized her wedding like a shield. Any criticism of her was an attack on her happiness. I opened the master budget file. I created a new column titled Status. I went through every single line item, the florist, the caterer, the venue, the band. I marked every paid item in green and every unpaid item in red. The red section was significantly larger than she had told Brent. I added a note at the bottom. Total outstanding balance. $15,400. Due date for majority. 14 days. I sent the file to her and removed myself as an editor. Then, I went to her vendor email threads, the ones where she had CC'd me so I could handle the boring math stuff, and sent a blind copy email to the vendors. Please direct all future invoices and billing questions to Tessa Hardwick. I am no longer the point of contact for this event. Tessa's text came in all caps. You are ruining everything. Brent is going to see this. Why are you doing this to me? I typed back. I am not doing anything to you. I am just handing you the bill for the party you are throwing. Finally, Caleb. I did not send him instructions. Caleb did not have a system to manage. He just had debts. I compiled a simple ledger. It was a list of every loan I had given him over the last 5 years. The bail money for his parking tickets. The startup capital for his t-shirt business that never printed a single shirt. The rent coverage. Total $12,850. I sent him the image. I am not asking for this back. I wrote, consider it a severance package, but the bank is closed. Do not ask again. By midnight. The tone of the messages had shifted. The mockery was gone. The drama queen insults had vanished. In their place was a rising tide of panic and manipulation. Marianne sent a long voice memo. I transcribed it rather than listening to her voice. Eloise, you are being incredibly selfish. You are punishing us just because you are in a bad place. A family does not keep score like this. You are holding a grudge and it is ugly. It does not look good on you. Graham sent an email with the subject line. Disappointed. I raised you to be better than this. Walking away when things get hard. That is cowardly. You are destroying this family over a bruised ego. Tessa simply sent a crying selfie. They were flailing. They were reaching for the buttons they had installed in my psyche decades ago. The guilt button, the shame button, the duty button. They pushed them over and over, expecting the machine to whir back to life and serve them. But the machine was unplugged. I sat in the dark car, the only light coming from the street lamp above, and the glow of my laptop. I opened my exit plan spreadsheet. I looked at the final row. Action revoke all administrative privileges. I moved my cursor to the checkbox. I clicked it, for the first time in 10 years. My to-do list was empty. There were no red flags, no urgent reminders, no deadlines that belonged to someone else. I reclined the driver's seat. It was still uncomfortable. My legs were still cramped. The air was still cold. But as I closed my eyes, I realized something profound. My phone was buzzing on the dashboard with their pleas and their insults, but I did not reach for it. I let it buzz. And for the first time since the fire, and perhaps for the first time in my adult life, the silence in my head was louder than their noise. I pulled my coat over me like a blanket and fell into a sleep that was deep, black, and entirely my own. The collapse of the Hardwick family empire did not happen with a bang. It happened with the quiet, terrifying accumulation of unread emails and missed deadlines. For years, I had been the invisible shield that protected them from the consequences of their own incompetence. I was the one who remembered the dates, the one who filed the paperwork, the one who double-checked the fine print. When I stepped away, I did not throw a grenade into their lives. I simply removed the shield. Gravity did the rest. The first domino fell on a Tuesday morning, exactly 4 days after I sent my resignation text. It started with Graham. My father sent me a screenshot of a letter from the state licensing board. The text was blurry, his hand obviously shaking when he took the photo. It was a notice of a penalty fee for failure to renew his contractor's liability insurance. His message followed immediately. Eloise, what is this? The policy was supposed to auto-renew. They are saying I have a lapse in coverage. If I have a lapse, I cannot step foot on the Miller job site. Call them and fix it. I will give you 5 minutes to explain how to navigate the menu. I looked at the phone. I remembered that policy. I remembered sending him 3 reminders 2 months ago to update the credit card on file because the old one had expired. He had ignored all of them. I typed back 3 words. Hire a CPA. Eloise. Stop playing games, he replied. I have a crew waiting on site. I am losing money by the hour. I swiped the notification away and went back to my freelance audit work. I felt a phantom twitch in my fingers, an urge to call the insurance company and beg for a grace period like I used to, but I forced my hands to stay on the keyboard. That was not my job anymore. By Thursday, the rot had spread to Marianne. My mother prided herself on being busy, but she had no concept of time management because I was her external clock. I used to sync her appointments to her phone and set alarms for her, without me. She missed a consultation with a high-end cosmetic dentist and a strategy meeting with a local boutique. She posted a black and white photo of a wilting flower on Instagram. The caption read, "The weight of the world is heavy when you are carrying it alone. Some people claim to love you but abandon you when the storm hits. Betrayal, strength." She was framing her inability to read a calendar as a Greek tragedy. But the real blow came that afternoon. I received a frantic voicemail from her. Her voice, usually so composed and melodic, was shrill. "Eloise, pick up the marketing team for the skincare brand, the big one. The $5,000 contract they just emailed asking for the proof of performance packet and the tax forms. They said if they do not get it by 5 o'clock, they are voiding the check. I do not know where the files are. You always keep them in that cloud thing. Send me the password right now." I knew exactly where the files were. They were in the Hardwick Home shared drive, inside a folder clearly labeled sponsorships, formatted perfectly because I had spent my Sunday afternoon organizing them. I had sent her the login credentials in my transition email. If she could not be bothered to read my instructions, she did not get the money. It was that simple. I did not return the call. On Friday, Tessa's illusion cracked. I received a notification from the wedding venue's automated system. My email was still listed as a backup contact. Though I had removed my ability to edit, it was a final delinquency notice. Tessa had told everyone that the catering deposit was handled in her mind. Handled meant she had thought about paying it, but the money she was supposed to use had likely gone toward the rush order on her custom veil. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up with a text from her. "The florist just called me. They said they are releasing our hold on the imported peonies because the check bounced. Why didn't you transfer the money from the savings bucket like I asked?" I stared at the screen. She was still operating under the delusion that I was her banker. "I told you last week," I replied. "I do not have access to your accounts, and there is no money in the savings bucket because you spent it on the bachelorette trip." "You are a liar," she wrote back. "You are trying to ruin my wedding because you are jealous that I'm happy and you are homeless, and then—" "Caleb," my brother had been quiet, which usually meant he was scrambling. On Saturday morning, he sent me a voice note. Look, I know you are mad or whatever, but I need you to log into the shipping portal. I have $2,000 worth of merchandise stuck in customs in New Jersey. They need a commercial invoice code. I don't know what that is. If I don't clear it today, they are going to auction it off. Just do this one thing, and we are even." We were not even. He owed me nearly $13,000, and a commercial invoice code was something I had taught him how to generate 6 times. "Google it. Caleb," I texted back. "You are actually useless," he replied. "Thanks for destroying my opportunity. Hope you feel good about yourself." By Sunday, the individual crises had merged into a collective meltdown. I was sitting in a coffee shop, nursing a cheap tea, when I saw the update on Graham's business page. It was a 1-star review from the Millers, the clients with the massive renovation project that was supposed to fund his retirement. "Unprofessional and disorganized." The review read, "The contractor failed to maintain proper licensure and insurance. Work was halted by the city inspector. We have terminated the contract and are seeking a refund of our deposit." Graham had lost the job, not because he was a bad builder, but because he was too arrogant to handle the paperwork I used to do for him in my sleep. The fallout was immediate, and for the first time, they did not just attack me, they turned on each other. I knew this because Brent, Tessa's fiancé, texted me. He was the only one who seemed to realize the ship was sinking. "It is a war zone over here. Eloise," he wrote, "your dad is screaming at your mom, saying she spends too much time on Instagram and not enough time helping him with the books. Your mom told him he is a failure who can't provide. Tessa is crying because your dad told her she has to cut the guest list in half to save money since the Miller job fell through. And Caleb just stormed out because no one would give him $500 for customs fees. I read the message twice. For years, I had believed that I was the problem. I thought I was the friction in their otherwise smooth machinery. I thought my anxiety, my nagging, and my rigidity were the only things preventing them from being happy. But as I sat there, watching the rain slide down the coffee shop window, I realized the truth. I was not the friction. I was the grease. I was the only thing keeping the gears from grinding each other into dust. They called themselves a perfect family, but they were actually four selfish people standing in a circle, holding hands only so they could pick each other's pockets. Without me there to fill their wallets and soothe their egos, the circle broke. Graham blamed Marianne for being superficial. Marianne blamed Graham for being incompetent. Tessa blamed Caleb for being a drain, and Caleb blamed everyone for not recognizing his genius. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. I did not feel happy. This was not the vindictive joy of a movie villain. It was a heavy, somber relief. It was the feeling of watching a controlled demolition of a building that had been condemned for years. The stage had ripped open. The actors were forgetting their lines, and for the first time in history, there was no prompter in the wings to whisper the words. They were on their own, and the show was turning into a tragedy. The calendar on my phone alerted me that exactly 365 days had passed since the night the sky turned orange over Maple Glen. It was the anniversary of the fire. Naturally, my mother did not mark the occasion with a private reflection or a quiet moment of gratitude that her daughter had survived. She marked it with a content strategy. I sat in my small, rented studio apartment, a clean, sparse space I had paid for with my own freelance money, and watched the notification pop up from Hardwick Home. It was a video titled, 1 Year of Healing Overcoming Toxic Energy. I clicked play. The video opened with a slow-motion shot of Marianne walking through a field of wheat, her hand trailing over the stalks, a soft acoustic guitar playing in the background. Last year, her voiceover whispered, our family faced a trial by fire, literally, but the flames were just a symptom. The real challenge was the negative energy we had been harboring. We had to learn that sometimes people you love are the ones dragging your vibration down. We had to release the toxicity to find our light again. She never said my name. She did not have to. Every single one of her 50,000 followers knew exactly who the toxic energy was. The comment section was filled with heart emojis and messages like, so brave of you to cut ties and sending love. Eloise was clearly draining you. I felt a cold, metallic taste in my mouth. They had taken my tragedy, the night I lost everything, and repackaged it as their spiritual victory. Then, the texts started coming. First, it was Marianne. Eloise, darling, we are having a small family dinner tonight, just a reunion. People are asking about you, and it looks strange that you are absent. Come home. Let us heal. Translation. Her engagement metrics were dipping because followers were asking why the loving mother had not posted a photo with her daughter in a year. She needed a prop. Then Tessa, seriously, just come. I have my final dress fitting next week, and the seamstress is charging me extra for rush alterations. I need someone who understands numbers to talk to her. I need my sister. Translation. She was broke and needed me to bully a vendor into lowering a price. And Caleb, yo, come over. We need to have an adult conversation. This silence is childish. Translation, he needed a loan. I stared at the messages, my instinct, the survival reflex I had honed over the last 12 months, screamed at me to block them and keep driving forward. I had built a new life. I had a contract with a forensic accounting firm. I had money in the bank. I did not need them. But then, my phone buzzed with a call from Rowan Price. Eloise, Rowan said, his voice professional but warm. I have news. I spoke to the VP at Northkite Ledgerworks. They saw your portfolio on the freelance audits. They want to bring you in as a senior analyst. I stopped breathing for a second. Northkite was the gold standard. It meant a 6-figure salary, full benefits, and a reputation that would bury the stain of my termination from Crown Harbor. There is just one thing, Rowan continued. They do extreme vetting, security clearance level. They are going to dig into everything. Your debts, your family's connections, any legal liabilities. If there is any mess attached to your name, any outstanding lawsuits with your father's company, any fraud flags, they will pull the offer. I looked at the exit plan spreadsheet still open on my laptop. I had severed the cords, yes, but I had not cauterized the wounds. My name was likely still entangled in the wreckage of Graham's tax filings and Caleb's shady imports. If Northkite looked too closely, they would see the smoke damage on my credit history. I understand, I told Rowan. I will make sure it is clean. I hung up. I knew what I had to do. I could not just ghost them. I had to go back one last time. I had to get them to sign the liability release forms I had drafted months ago, documents that legally separated my financial identity from theirs. I needed to close the loop so completely that not even a federal background check could find a link. So, I replied to Marianne, I will be there at 7. Driving back to the Hardwick house felt like driving onto a movie set after the actors had gone on strike. The lawn was overgrown. The paint on the front porch was peeling. Graham clearly had not gotten around to fixing it. When I walked through the door, the smell of roast beef hit me, followed immediately by the blinding light of a ring light stand set up in the dining room. "Eloise!" Marianne cried out, rushing toward me with her arms open. She was wearing a white linen dress, perfectly coordinated with the table setting. "Oh, look at you. You look so resilient." She tried to pull me into a hug, angling us toward the camera she had recording in the corner. I stepped smoothly to the left. It was a small movement, barely an inch, but it placed me just out of the frame. Marianne's smile faltered. She reached for my arm to pull me back into the shot. "Let's sit," I said, my voice flat. "I cannot stay long." The dinner was a masterclass in tension. The table was set beautifully, but the energy was frantic. Graham looked 10 years older. His hair was thinning, and he had a nervous tic in his left eye. He was drinking whiskey, which was unusual for a Tuesday. "So," Graham said, stabbing a potato with unnecessary force, "I hear you are doing freelance work. Must be nice to set your own hours while the rest of us are drowning in red tape." "It is steady," I said, unfolding my napkin. "How is the business, Dad?" "The city is a nightmare," he snapped. "They are auditing the Miller job. Fines on top of fines. If you had just—" He stopped himself, catching Marianne's warning glare. If the paperwork had been filed correctly last year, we would not be in this mess. "The paperwork was filed correctly," I said calmly. "You let the license lapse 3 months after I left. That is on public record." Tessa chimed in, her voice high and tight. "Can we not talk about business? It is a celebration, Eloise. Wait until you see the dress." "But the venue? God. Elle, they are threatening to cancel the date because the second installment is late. Mom said you might have some savings you could lend us, just until the wedding gifts come in." There it was, the ask. "I do not have savings for you, Tessa," I said. "I am here to sign some papers. I need you all to formally remove me as a guarantor on the business loans and the car leases. I brought the forms." Caleb slammed his hand on the table. "See, this is what I mean. You come back here, eat our food, and act like you are better than us. You think you are some big shot now because you live in a studio apartment. You owe us. Eloise, you walked out and left us to rot." "I left you to handle your own lives," I corrected him. Marianne stood up, tears glistening in her eyes, tears that appeared on command. "We are a family. Why do you hate us so much? I have spent the last year trying to protect your reputation, telling everyone you needed space, and you treat us like enemies." I looked at her. I looked at the camera blinking in the corner, recording this performance. "You called me toxic energy to 50,000 people this morning." "Mom," I said, "I saw the video." The room went silent. Marianne froze. That was a metaphor," she stammered. "I am sure it was," I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. "I am not here to fight. I am here to finalize my exit. If you want me to stop the credit bureau investigation regarding the fraudulent card Dad opened in my name, you will sign these release forms tonight." Graham went pale. You reported that—" "I reported a fraudulent account," I said. "I did not name the suspect. Yet, sign the papers. Dad, release me from the liability, and I will tell the bank it was a misunderstanding." It was blackmail. But it was legal. Necessary blackmail. They signed. One by one. They signed the documents that cut me loose. Graham's hand shook. Tessa cried silently. Caleb refused to look at me. Marianne just stared at the camera. Realizing she could not use any of this footage, I put the signed papers back in my bag. I stood up. "Thank you for dinner," I said. I walked out the front door before dessert was served. The night air was cool, filling my lungs with a clarity I had not felt in years. I had done it. I was free. Northkite would see a clean record. I got into my car and started the engine. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I assumed it was another guilt trip text from Marianne, but when I checked the screen, the notification was from an unknown email address. It was from the independent fire investigator I had hired with my first freelance check. Months ago, I had almost forgotten about him. He had promised to look into the official undetermined cause of the fire that took my home. Subject: preliminary findings. Hardwick property fire. I opened the email. My heart hammered against my ribs. Ms. Hardwick, I have completed the analysis of the burn patterns and the recovered debris from the duplex utility room. The official report cited an old fuse box. However, I found traces of a secondary bypass wire that was not code compliant. It was a cheap, copper splice used to route power around the meter, likely to lower the electric bill. This type of work is amateur but specific. I traced the purchase order for the wire gauge found in the ashes. It was purchased at Builder's Choice Supply 3 days before the fire. The account used for the purchase belongs to Stoneforge Renovations. I stopped breathing. My house did not burn down because of bad luck. It did not burn down because of an accident. It burned down because my father, Graham Hardwick, had tried to save a few dollars on my electric bill by installing a bypass he was not qualified to install using materials he bought on the credit card. He stole my identity to open. They stood in the driveway and laughed. They had called it karma. They had called me toxic, but they were the arsonists. I looked back at the house. Through the window, I could see them arguing. I wasn't just going to leave them to rot anymore. I was going to hand this report to the insurance company, and then I was going to watch them burn. The glow of my phone screen was the only light in the car, but the words in the email felt like they were burning directly into my retinas. I read the paragraph again. Secondary bypass wire, not code compliant, amateur installation. My mind began to race backward, rewinding the film of the last year until it paused on a Saturday afternoon 3 months before the fire. I remembered it vividly, because it was one of the few times Graham had come to my duplex without being asked. He had been in a good mood, manic almost, complaining about how the power company was ripping people off with their delivery fees. "Landlords are thieves. Eloise," he had said, marching toward my utility closet with his toolbox. "And the utility commission is worse. Let me take a look at your panel. I bet I can optimize the flow. Save you $30 or $40 a month." I hesitated. "Dad, I rent. We are not supposed to touch the wiring. I am a licensed contractor." He had lied, or at least exaggerated, since his license was already on probation back then. "I know what I'm doing. Don't be such a rule follower. I am doing you a favor." I had let him do it. I had let him do it because saying no to Graham Hardwick resulted in a week of silence and passive-aggressive comments about how I didn't trust my own father. He had spent 20 minutes there. He came out wiping grease on his jeans, looking smug. "Fixed it," he had said. "You will thank me when the bill comes." I never thanked him, and the bill came in the form of a pile of ash. I drove back to my studio apartment in a trance. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I did not feel anger yet. I felt a nausea so profound it made my stomach cramp. When I got inside, I I did not pace. I did not cry. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. I needed to be sure. I needed the final link in the chain. I navigated to the online portal for Builder's Choice Supply. I still had the login credentials because I was the one who had frozen the fraudulent credit card Graham had opened in my name. I pulled up the transaction history. I scrolled to the date 3 days before Graham visited my duplex. There it was. A purchase for 50 feet of 10-gauge copper wire and a set of heavy-duty splice connectors. The brand and specifications on the invoice matched the debris description in the investigator's report perfectly. He had bought the materials to create an illegal bypass using a credit card he had opened by stealing my identity. Then, he had installed those materials in my home without the landlord's permission. When the substandard wiring inevitably overheated and ignited the insulation, burning my life to the ground. He stood in the driveway and filmed it. He stood there and blamed bad luck. He blamed karma. He told the world the universe was taking out the trash. The trash was his own handiwork. I needed one more confirmation. I needed to know if this was just arrogance or if he knew he had made a mistake. I picked up my phone and texted Brent. Eloise. Hey, I have a weird question. Do you remember back in October? Did my dad ever mention doing work on my apartment? I watched the 3 little dots bubble on the screen. It was late, but Brent was likely awake, stressing over the wedding budget I had just blown up. Brent, yeah. Actually, he bragged about it at Sunday dinner once, said he hacked your electric panel to lower the bill. He called it the Hardwick discount. Why I closed my eyes. The Hardwick discount. He had laughed about it. He had treated a fire hazard like a clever life hack. I did not reply to Brent. I took a screenshot of the text. I saved it to the folder. The next morning, I took a half-day off from my new freelance contract. I drove to the city to meet with the lawyer Rowan had introduced me to. Her name was Sarah, and she specialized in insurance fraud and liability. Her office was nothing like the chaotic, paper-strewn desk of my father. It was sleek, minimalist, and terrifyingly organized. I laid everything out on her glass table. The investigator's report, the invoice from Builder's Choice Supply, the screenshot from Brent, the video of my mother and father standing in front of the fire, smiling. Sarah read through the documents in silence. The ticking of the wall clock was the only sound in the room. After 10 minutes, she took off her glasses and looked at me. Her expression was a mixture of professional assessment and human horror. Eloise, she said softly, this is not just civil liability. This is criminal negligence. If you had been in that room when the fire started, if you had not woken up, we would be talking about involuntary manslaughter. The word hung in the air. Manslaughter. He didn't mean to set the fire, I said automatically. The defense mechanism of a dutiful daughter was hard to break, even now. Intent does not matter when you perform illegal electrical work without a permit, using materials obtained through identity theft. Sarah corrected me. He created the condition that destroyed your home, and then he collected the insurance payout on his own policy for emotional distress and loss of family property. Did you know? He filed a claim for the tools he left in your garage. I blinked. He filed a claim. Yes, Sarah said, tapping a document I hadn't seen before. He claimed $5,000 for tools destroyed in the fire, tools he likely used to set the trap. The nausea returned. He had profited from it. He had burned my house down and made $5,000. What do you want to do? Sarah asked. We can file a civil suit for damages. We can go to the police. We can report this to the insurance carrier, which would trigger a fraud investigation that would likely send him to prison. I looked at the paperwork. I thought about the reunion dinner. I thought about Marianne trying to pull me into the camera frame. I thought about Caleb calling me selfish. If I went to the police now, it would be a messy public trial. Marianne would spin it. She would play the victim. She would say I was a vindictive daughter trying to frame her poor, aging father. The narrative would get muddy. I do not want to go to the police yet, I said. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Why not? Because they will deny it, I said. They will say I am lying. They will say I asked him to do it. They will say I am hysterical. I need them to admit it, or at least, I need them to be in a position where they cannot deny it without destroying themselves. So, you want leverage, Sarah concluded. I want accountability, I said. I want to own the truth so completely that they can never spin a story about me again. I spent the rest of the week assembling what I called the truth package. It was not a chaotic pile of accusations. It was a binder. Section 1. The timeline, every date, every hour, from the purchase of the wire to the moment the first alarm rang. Section 2. The forensics, the investigators' photos of the melted copper splice. Section 3. The finance, the credit card statement showing the fraud, the insurance claim Graham filed for the tools. Section 4. The character, the text messages, the transcripts of their cruelty. I scanned every page. I created digital backups on 3 different servers. I renamed the folder on my laptop. It had been called The Fire, then Revenge. I backspaced over the word revenge. It felt too hot, too emotional. Revenge was what Caleb would seek, a petty, reactive lash out. I typed in the new name, accountability. It looked clean. It looked professional. It looked like the end of the show. I closed the laptop. For the first time in 365 days, the phantom smell of smoke that had haunted my nose vanished. I was not afraid of them anymore. You do not have to fear people when you hold the map of their destruction in your hands. I was ready for the wedding. I was ready for the finale. The unraveling of the Hardwick family image was not a slow fade. It was a structural failure that happened in plain sight. It began with Tessa. For months, she had been posting sneak peeks of her fairy tale wedding, tagging luxury vendors who had no idea they were about to be stiffed. On a Tuesday morning, the veneer cracked. A process server showed up at the house not with a gift, but with a lawsuit. The high-end catering company was suing for breach of contract and theft of services. Apparently, Tessa had forgotten to mention that the tasting menu she and Brent devoured for free was contingent on a deposit she never paid. The lawsuit went public because the caterer, tired of being ghosted, posted a redacted version of the complaint on a local business forum. The dream wedding was suddenly being discussed not for its aesthetic, but for its insolvency. Then came Marianne. The organic supplement brand that had requested her tax information did not just ghost her. They sent a cease and desist letter. They were freezing her contract due to inconsistencies in financial disclosure. In simpler terms, Marianne had tried to claim business expenses for things like spa days and family dinners, without me there to massage the categories into something legally gray but acceptable. She had filed them as direct write-offs. The brand demanded a full audit or the return of their advance. Graham was next. He had finally hired a cheap CPA to handle the mess I left behind. I heard through the grapevine, meaning a frantic text from Brent, that the accountant had walked out of the office after 2 hours, declaring the books a crime scene, not a ledger. The IRS sent a notice of intent to levy assets for 3 years of miscalculated payroll taxes. And Caleb. My brother finally hit the wall he had been running toward. His business partner in the dropshipping scheme accused him of holding inventory without payment. It wasn't just a dispute. It was an accusation of wire fraud. Caleb came home screaming that I had sabotaged his login credentials, locking him out of the account so he couldn't pay the supplier. The invitation to the family meeting came on a Thursday night. It was not a request. It was a summons. We need to settle this tonight. Graham texted, "No more games. Be here at 8. I knew exactly what it was. It was an ambush. They were drowning, and they had decided that the only way to save themselves was to hold my head under the water. I arrived at 8 o'clock sharp. The house felt different this time. The ring lights were put away. The curtains were drawn. The air smelled of stale coffee and panic. They were all sitting at the dining room table. Marianne was weeping into a tissue, a performance of fragility. Graham was red-faced, pacing the floor. Tessa was glaring at the table, refusing to look up. Caleb was vibrating with rage. "Sit down," Graham commanded. I remained standing. "I am comfortable here." "Comfortable?" Caleb spat. jumping up. You think this is funny? I have a fraud investigator calling my phone. You changed the passwords. You locked me out. I gave you the new passwords in the transition document 6 months ago, I said calmly. Did you open the email? I shouldn't have to open an email to access my own money, he shouted, missing the irony entirely. Graham slammed his hand on the table. Enough. This isn't about passwords. It is about responsibility. You managed these accounts for 10 years. Eloise, you set up these systems. You created these traps. Traps? I asked. The tax filings, Graham yelled. The accountant says the categorization is a mess. You filed them for years. If there are errors now, it is because you set a precedent of negligence. You built a house of cards and then walked away so it would fall on us. Marianne looked up, her eyes wide and pleading. Eloise, the brand. They are saying I misled them. But you were the one who always reviewed the contracts. You were the one who told me what was deductible. You let me believe it was safe. If I go down for this, it is because of your bad advice. Tessa finally spoke, her voice trembling. The caterer says the contract was voided because of a missed deadline in November. You were still handling the budget in November. You missed it on purpose. You wanted me to fail. I listened to them. I watched them rewrite history in real time. They were weaving a narrative where they were the innocent victims of a vindictive, incompetent daughter who had sabotaged them from the inside. They were preparing to throw me to the IRS, the vendors, and the fraud investigators. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply placed my leather satchel on the table and unzipped it. I pulled out a single, thick binder. I opened it in the first tab. This, I said, my voice steady, is a timeline of every single handover. I pointed to a document. On October 15th, I sent an email to Caleb with the subject line account access and vendor codes. The server log shows it was delivered. It was never opened. I flipped the page. On November 1st, I sent a certified letter to Tessa regarding the catering deadline, including the specific warning that failure to pay by November 10th would void the contract. Here is the signature from the postman. You signed for it. Tessa. Tessa went pale. I flipped again. And here is the transfer of authority for the Stoneforge tax portal, dated 3 weeks before the filing deadline, along with a signed acknowledgement from you, Dad, that you had received the login keys. I looked at them, my gaze sweeping across their stunned faces. From this date, I said, pointing to the bolded date on the summary page, I no longer had access. I did not touch a single file. I did not pay a single bill. I did not advise on a single contract. The chaos you are drowning in is not my sabotage. It is your own reflection. The room was silent. The air was sucked out of their lungs. They had expected me to defend myself against their feelings. They were not prepared for me to defend myself with data. Marianne stopped crying instantly. She wiped her face, her expression hardening into something cold and ugly. You think you are so smart with your binders and your dates, she hissed. But you forget who holds the real power here. We are your family. We made you. You used me, I corrected. And we can destroy you, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You think the fire is the end of the story. You think that little video I posted was everything. She leaned forward, a cruel smile touching her lips. I have the rest of the footage. Eloise, the uncut version from that night. My content manager kept it on the hard drive. We were saving it for a rainy day, for a revelation piece about how unstable you were, how you were screaming and acting erratic before the fire started. We can edit that night to look however we want. We can make you look like an arsonist. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just that they had filmed my house burning. It was that they had kept the raw footage. The footage of me shivering, terrified, and vulnerable as ammunition. They had archived my trauma not as a memory, but as a weapon to be deployed if I ever stepped out of line. You kept the footage, I repeated slowly, in case you needed a story. It is called leverage. Darling, Marianne said, leaning back as if she had just played a winning card. So here is the deal. You are going to fix the tax audit, you are going to pay Tessa's caterer, and you are going to clear Caleb's debt. Or else the world sees the version of Eloise we want them to see. I looked at my father. He did not object. I looked at Tessa. She looked hopeful. I looked at Caleb. He was smirking. They were willing to frame me for the destruction of my own home to save their credit scores. I closed the binder. A strange, calm sensation washed over me. It was the feeling of the final shackle snapping. "You are right, Mom," I said softly. "The truth is a powerful thing." I picked up my bag. I did not tell them about the fire investigator's report. I did not tell them about the credit card fraud evidence I had in my car. I did not tell them that by admitting they had the uncut video. She had just confirmed that she was more interested in content strategy than her daughter's survival. "I am not fixing this," I said. "And you should probably call your content manager. I have a feeling you are going to need a really good PR strategy very soon." I walked out of the house. I could hear them yelling after me, but their voices sounded distant, like noise from a television in another room. They thought they had trapped me. They did not realize they had just handed me the moral clearance to detonate the bomb I had been building for a year. They were not just a cracked family. They were a syndicate, and I was done being the witness. I was about to become a prosecutor. The frantic summons came 48 hours before Tessa's wedding was scheduled to begin. It was not an invitation. It was a hostage negotiation. The text from Graham was short and desperate. "The venue is locking the doors at noon tomorrow. The caterer is threatening to sue for fraud. The IRS has frozen the business accounts. Just come over. Help us untangle the wires one last time, and then you can go. We will leave you alone forever. Just fix this. Untangle the wires." The irony of his choice of words was almost suffocating. I drove to the house in silence. I did not feel the knot of anxiety in my stomach that used to define these drives. I felt the cool, heavy weight of the folder on the passenger seat. I was not bringing a checkbook. I was not bringing a spreadsheet of solutions. I was bringing the end of the story. When I walked into the living room, the atmosphere was thick enough to choke on. The perfect family was in ruins. Tessa was sobbing on the sofa, her face buried in her hands. Brent stood by the window, looking like a man who had just realized he was boarding a sinking ship. Caleb was pacing, muttering about lawsuits. Marianne was sitting in her armchair, scrolling frantically through her phone, likely deleting comments from angry followers. Graham looked gray, defeated, and cornered. "Thank God," Marianne said. Looking up, she did not smile. "You are here? Look, we can spin this. If you can just loan us the $15,000 for the venue, we can pay you back when the brand deal clears. I just need you to write an email to the legal department explaining that the tax error was a clerical mistake on your end. And the business accounts," Graham added, refusing to make eye contact. "I need you to talk to the IRS agent. Tell them you were the bookkeeper. Tell them I didn't know about the payroll taxes. They will go easier on a confused employee than a negligent owner." "And my inventory," Caleb shouted. "Just sign into the portal and release the funds. Eloise. They are going to call the cops on me. They were doing it again. They were asking me to set myself on fire to keep them warm. They wanted me to take the legal blame for their tax evasion, their fraud, and their debts. They wanted me to be the villain in the official record so they could remain the heroes on Instagram." I walked to the coffee table. I did not sit down. I placed the thick binder in the center of the room. It landed with a heavy thud that silenced them. "I am not here to pay your bills," I said, my voice steady. "And I am certainly not here to go to prison for you." "Then why are you here?" Tessa wailed. "To watch us suffer." "To close the file," I said. I opened the binder to the section marked "The Fire." I pulled out the independent investigator's report and the invoice from Builder's Choice Supply. I slid them across the table toward Graham. "I know how the fire started." "Dad," I said. Graham froze. He stared at the papers, his face draining of color. "It was an accident," he stammered, his voice cracking. "The wiring, the house was old." "The house was fine," I corrected him. The illegal bypass you installed to steal electricity was not, you bought 50 feet of 10-gauge copper wire on a credit card you opened in my name without my permission. You installed it without a permit, and when it overheated and burned my life to the ground, you stood in the driveway and filmed it. The room went deathly silent. Brent turned slowly from the window, staring at Graham with horror. You said it was the fuse box, Brent said, his voice low. You told everyone it was bad luck. It was, Graham insisted, sweat beading on his forehead. I was trying to save money. I used the heavy-duty connectors. It should have been held. It wasn't my fault the insulation was cheap. He stopped. He realized too late that he had just confessed. He had just admitted to the room and to his future son-in-law that he had performed the work. Marianne let out a gasp. She looked at Graham, then at me. Her instinct, honed by years of curating a public image, kicked in. She reached for her phone, her thumb hovering over the camera app. We can fix this, she whispered, her eyes darting around. We can make a video, a confession, a redemption arc, a father's mistake, a family's forgiveness. Eloise, if you stand by him, we can sell this as a tragedy of love. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had birthed me, who was currently calculating the engagement metrics of her husband's crime. Put the phone down, Mom, I said. You do not want to film this. Why? She snapped. Because you want to ruin us. Because you are pathetic, I said. It was not an insult. It was an observation. You want me to stand here and forgive him so you can save the brand. You do not care that I was homeless. You do not care that I lost everything. You only care that the audience might stop liking your photos. You want to save the image, not the human being. Marianne flinched as if I had slapped her. She slowly lowered the phone. Tessa stood up, her mascara running down her cheeks. She looked at Graham, then at the invoice. You burned her house down, she whispered, and you let us treat her like garbage. I didn't mean to, Graham shouted. I was trying to help. You didn't help, Brent said coldly. He walked over to Tessa. We are leaving, now. But the wedding, Tessa sobbed. There is no wedding, Tessa, Brent said. Not with this money, and not with this family. I am not marrying into a fraud. Tessa let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. She collapsed back onto the sofa. The wedding was not being ruined by a vengeful sister. It was collapsing under the weight of the truth. Caleb, seemingly immune to the emotional gravity of the moment, slammed his hand on the table. Okay, fine, Dad screwed up, but what about me? You still owe me. Eloise, you cut me off and wrecked my business. You owe this family for everything we gave you. I looked at him. I reached into the binder one last time. I pulled out the Hardwick balance spreadsheet. I laid it out like a map. It covered the table, columns of dates, rows of tasks, years of unpaid labor, the loans I never asked for, the taxes I filed, the crises I averted. The total value at the bottom was in the 6 figures. I don't owe you anything, I said. This is the ledger. This is every hour I worked for you, every dollar I gave you, every time I save you. I pointed to the empty column on the far right. And this, I said, is the column for thank you. It is empty. It has always been empty. I looked at Caleb. I am not the debt you need to collect. I was the asset you squandered. I pulled a single document from the front pocket of the binder. It was a liability separation agreement. It stated that I had no knowledge of their business dealings, that I was not a guarantor for their debts, and that I was formally severing all financial ties. I placed a pen on top of it. I am not going to the police today, I said, and I am not going to the insurance company, yet, but you are going to sign this, all of you. You are going to release me from every single liability. If you do, I walk away and take the evidence with me. If you don't, I will drive straight to the fraud division. Graham looked at the invoice for the copper wire. He looked at me. He saw the resolve in my eyes. He knew I was not bluffing. He picked up the pen. His hand shook, but he signed. Marianne signed next, refusing to look at me. Caleb signed, muttering curses under his breath. Tessa didn't even read it. She just scribbled her name. Too broken to care. I took the paper. I put it in my bag. I left the binder of evidence on the table. They could keep the record of their own destruction. "Eloise," Graham said, his voice small as I turned to leave. "What are we supposed to do now?" I stopped at the door. I looked back at the house I had grown up in, the house that had been a stage for a play I no longer had a role in. "You do what everyone else does," I said. "You live with the consequences." I walked out into the night air. It was crisp and clean. Behind me, I could hear the muffled sounds of shouting as the family began to tear itself apart, assigning blame for the wreckage they had created. I walked to my car. I got in and started the engine. I did not look back in the rearview mirror. I drove away from the cracked foundation, the peeling paint, and the people who claimed to love me only when I was useful. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs. For the first time in a year, my chest did not hurt. I did not burn their lives down. I only stopped being the firefighter for flames I did not start. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening on your commute, at the gym, or maybe while organizing your own life? Let me know in the comments below. I love reading your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Veronica Revenge Stories. Give this video a like and hit that hype button so more people can hear the truth. Stay strong and see you in the next one.